now we go into the final stage of the International Convention of Fasecolda, Colombia a Safer Country, and thanks to virtuality from the Presidency of the Republic, we will start off this closing session. From the House of Nariño, we have Mr. Miguel Gomez Martinez address us. As I mentioned, we are coming to the final stretch of this convention, and thanks to virtuality, we're going to start the closing of this event. And with you, we will have Mr. Miguel Gomez Martinez from the Presidency of the Republic.
Ladies and gentlemen, following, we have the President of the Republic of Colombia, Dr. Iván Duque Márquez. Good morning to all of you. My sincere greetings and sympathies to Mr. Miguel Gomez. Pleasure to have you at the Presidential House. I salute Luis Eduardo Suárez, our Chairman of the Board of Fasecolda. I greet William Fadul, Dr. Roberto Junguito Bonet, Dr. Roberto Botero, ex-chairmen of Fasecolda. My greetings to the Ministry of Housing, Jonathan Malagon. My regards to Superintendent Jorge Castaño. And I greet all the entrepreneurs and company leaders of the sector present here today. Without a doubt, 2020 will be remembered as a year that is unique, and of course we expect that it doesn't repeat itself the way it has.
Mr. President Iván Duque Márquez, Ministers of the Office, Financial Superintendent, members of the national government, presidents of the different insurance companies that are established in Colombia, intermediaries of insurance, representatives of the reinsurance companies, special guests, dear foreign participants, representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Only 6 months ago, very few people would have predicted the moment that we are currently undergoing. Not even the insurance industry that are experts in assessing risk had incorporated accurately the impact of a pandemic that surprised all of us due to its expansion speed and the social and economic effects that it produced on a worldwide scale. Mr. President, I can't start this presentation without recognizing in a clear and emphatic fashion the enormous task that your government has done in these moments of extreme difficulty. In an exceptional fashion by the situation formulated by the pandemic, this has requested or required an important effect of the presidency to attack these situations of public health. As Colombians, we have seen a chief of government that is present, highly active, dedicated and fully committed, and concerned for his compatriots, capable of showing optimism under these such sensitive circumstances. On behalf of the insurance industry, well, this is the time, Mr. President, to highlight and to thank the enormous leadership on your end and your team in these critical moments for the nation. History will remember the youngest president of this republic facing with decision a challenge that no country or any other governor of the world had been prepared for. So thank you, Mr. President Iván Duque, for this. It is also in this unprecedented environment that I have come here today on behalf of the insurance companies that operate in Colombia to show a summary of the status of the sector and our undeclinable commitment in favor of the recovery of the economy. As well as the other productive activities, the insurance industry has been heavily affected by COVID-19. The impacts are many because we are a cross-cutting business. We are present in almost all of the different facets of the productive world. But different to many other activities, the insurance companies are familiarized with cycles. We work with a long midterm view. We operate with a logic of reserves. We know about claims, and therefore we act with serenity that different to people who are only concerned for annual results. The work or labor risk systems, I would like to start off by mentioning that in this crisis, the labor risk system has shown to have the capability to protect workers in Colombia, and they are guarantors of productivity in the country. So the accidents and mortality related to work should keep low levels. And in case accidents happen or diseases due to labor take place, they can quickly recover workers so that they can go back to their activities. The results shown by the sector as well as the system are noticeable. Between 2015 and 2019, the coverage had an increase of 7%. And in that same time, there has been a reduction of 34% in the rate of accidents and 31% in mortality rates and almost 10% in diseases of labor origin. These figures that show the system have been reached mainly because of the possibility that the labor institutions have to carry out works related to promotion and prevention. And this is how the national government, in agreement with the industry, appointed the ARL's new obligations, such as the acquisition and distribution of personal protection equipment and a direct recognition of COVID-19 as a labor disease for the health personnel. And despite the initial difficulties, it is a reason of satisfaction to inform the country that we have fulfilled our task. To date, the sector has acquired and distributed close to 42 million personal protection elements. We have attended over 31,000 workers, and we are responding with over 140 billion pesos in pensions, health, and incapacity. It is important to recognize the effort of the government and the labor risk institutions to support the SMEs. Two mechanisms have been essential to increase social protection and to mitigate the severe consequences of this pandemic. First, the implementation of the minimum floor for social protection, and second, a set forth of prevention that seeks to alleviate or relieve the workload of workers in an effort to mitigate risk of contagion of this pandemic. We cannot stop mentioning or leave behind the concern of the sector in the face of legislative initiatives that seek to deviate the success of the system by appointing these risk institutions that don't have to do with them, that can compromise their feasibility. It has been this institution that contrasts with the severe issues of other components of Social Security, the one that has allowed dozens of companies to transfer this to the risk sector, offering at the same time protections to millions of workers and their families. The mandatory insurance for traffic accidents, or SOAT, can be considered as a true universal coverage that is offered by the insurance sector in Colombia. Any pedestrian, any driver, passenger, or bike rider that moves around the country and that is a victim of transit or traffic is covered by this insurance. During the past decade, we have addressed, and this has been charged to SOAT, close to 5.5 million Colombians that received priority health attention, a transfer by way of ambulance to the closest health centers, and additional coverages in case of permanent incapacities and deaths. Out of every 100 pesos paid by Colombian for their insurance for their vehicles, close to 43 are allocated to health by way of address, and 2 pesos are transferred to the National Road Insurance Agency. And by way of SOAT, 1.8 trillion pesos were collected, and these were transferred to the health of Colombians in the past year, and another 85 trillion that were allocated to improve safety on the streets and roads. We are concerned, Mr. President, about legislative actions that derail the sensitive sustainability of economics that at the same time would have an impact on the resources collected for the general health system and the National Road Safety Agency. The insurance sector shares the desire that the cost of SOAT should be reduced for all vehicle owners. This will only be possible if, as a fruit of more road safety, we can record less accidents and victims of accidents, and if we are able to reduce the fraud that insurance is affected by due to irregularities and overcosts that some insurance providers insist on claiming charged to the SOAT. We should warn that the perspective on this branch is difficult if we take into account the noticeable evasion of this insurance that has reached maximum historical levels close to 50%. Out of every 7 or 15.5 million vehicles, 7.6 do it without having this insurance that is mandatory by nature. So this situation is sensitive because it directly affects the health system that stops receiving around 1.6 trillion pesos annually, and at the same time, they should assume the health attention of those people who die or are accidented by an accident with vehicles that have not had this insurance. I would like to inform you that upon instruction, the insurance companies will transfer the health system by way of address close to 202 trillion pesos, equivalent to the lesser value of the claims as a consequence of the lesser circulation of vehicles and accidents during the pandemic. The SOAT is an example in the region to face the complex issue of public health caused by accidents. To reduce this will be transferred in weakening an instrument that shows every day its huge value in the protection of the lives of Colombians. Life and people. The current circumstances the country goes through requires additional efforts on behalf of public and private actors. The persons that attend patients that are suspicious or that have been diagnosed with COVID-19 have been directly affected in their health and life in all the countries around the world where the virus has been present in. And these lives, lost lives, even though these cannot be repaired, deserve a social and financial recognition that will allow for a temporary protection of the well-being of the families that have been affected. The coverage created by the industry that we have called the strength that takes care of us seeks to recognize the work of these persons that have become a symbol of hope and dedication under the suffering that this disease has caused for the entire world. The coverage is for all of these health workers, professionals, technologists, technicians in charge of the provision of healthcare services, besides the staff that has to do with disinfection and cleaning of the health infrastructure, food, and transportation of patients. It also includes the students that are residents in medicine and those who are providing their mandatory social service. The resources of this coverage are funded entirely with contributions made by the guild companies. In this sense, families should not contribute with any type of resource, and they will receive an amount as a donation. These resources are directly administered by Fasecolda, that is in charge of its follow-up and control, as well as how they receive claims, how we recognize and pay the beneficiaries. An effort like this is a solidarity gesture from the insurance companies to the country, and we confirm our support to the Colombian people. Social Security. The health insurance or the insurance sector has a very important role in the pensional system in Colombia by way of the insurance and vital rent. And this is how we transfer insurance companies different risks that in another way should be assumed by pension funds, by affiliates, or by those that have retired. The vital rent is a pension by which the retiree has an insurance company and they contract a periodic rent until they die, and that of their beneficiaries in this modality. The financial risks and extra longevity are assumed by the insurance company, guaranteeing an annual increase in pension, as well as an adjustment of the minimum wage or an increase of the index price to the consumer. This rent is also affected by a reduction in the minimum wage as a difference of the percentual change of the minimum wage and the reduction of the index of prices to the consumer. In virtue of the above, the Guild will put under the government's consideration a proposal for the implementation of a new coverage mechanism for this risk of a reduction of wages that were left outside the coverage left by Decree 036 of 2015. Through this, we pretend to eliminate one of the sources of uncertainty that puts at risk the continuity and the feasibility of the system on a long term. And it proposes a mechanism that benefits all the actors that assume risks in the pensional system. So this way, they can have a financial system that is sustainable, that supports the obligations with those that are in pension. Agricultural insurance. The agricultural aspect is also a strategic aspect by Colombia being one of the 7 countries around the world that has an open agriculture boundaries to produce food, agro-energy in a sustainable fashion. Nevertheless, the rural area has high vulnerability with geological, meteorological, anthropic, and market matters. The offering of agricultural insurances has increased in the past years. The variety in the offering of this insurance is very high. In 2019, over 25 types of crops were insured. In the 185,000 hectares, 96% higher, and this is the figure that has been registered in 2018. To date, the value insured is 1.1 trillion pesos with an annual growth of 57% when compared to 2018. The main crops that have been insured are hectares planted in sugarcane, forestry, banana, rice, corn, and coffee. In 2019, the agricultural insurance reached 26th of the 32 countries around the world, and it protected investments of over 6,762 producers in the countryside. When compared to 2018, this proposed an increase of 90% in the number of beneficiaries of this insurance. And nevertheless, we have only been able to protect under the figure of agricultural insurance between 3 and 4% of the hectares planted with licit crops in Colombia, while the insurance of agricultural projects is barely starting. We believe and consider essential the legislative bill for the Chamber of 2020 that seeks to grant legal insurance to agriculture, and for this we request the support of the national government. The materialization of this will without a doubt potentialize a better inclusion in insurance for the Colombian field. Vehicle insurance. The vehicle insurance in Colombia starts to suffer deep changes with regards to the traditional product. These modifications have been motivated mainly by the transformation in the mobilization of persons in the cities, the information available regarding the behavior, the continuous improvement of technologies of vehicles, and the demands of new insurees who have an important aspect in the market. Only 29% of the vehicles registered in the country have a coverage for damages. But starting from the 4th or 5th year of of antiquity of the vehicles, this dramatically falls from close to 80% down to 10%. This confirms the long path yet to go through in the protection of drivers. Multi-coverage that protects those insured regardless of the vehicle they drive, and the payment for the use are examples of the new type of vehicle insurance that starts to be commercialized in the country. To this, we add the effort made by the industry by way of Fasecolda to speed up the attention of simple crashes that seek the people to minimize their time on the road where their vehicle is committed or compromised. The special case of mandatory insurance and the offering. There are several countries around the world that establish mandatory coverages to the companies and persons that carry out activities considered to be highly hazardous or of high risk. And as an example of this insurance, we have a civil responsibility for the transportation of passengers and the mandatory insurance offered by aerial transportation. In the past years, the companies have shown high claims that have allowed companies not only to review the cost of the insurance, but also the offering of coverage for those who are obliged to acquire it. And this is where we have many issues with difficult solutions. On one end, companies require a coverage for their operation, and on the other side, a small group, but highly representative of these, simply does not meet the minimum conditions of risk necessary so that they can have an insurance. And falsely, we believe that a new regulation that obliges insurance companies to offer coverages to all the insurees is a solution to the problem. To force companies to accept risks that can affect the rest of the mutuality is not only unfair with the other insurers, but it also boosts insurance companies to leave the marketplace. If giving this as a requirement for operations, it is at the same time a quality control of the provider of the service. So if a person, whether legal or natural, doesn't have a coverage, well, this is a warning signal regarding the capability of operating in society under minimum conditions of safety. If for economic or social reasons, we should have these people to carry out an activity that is generally an essential service, well, we need to identify them and create them if we want a scheme of risk transfer that is an alternative, where besides we help them reach an adequate level of risk. At the end, the final objective is not to obtain a policy in the market, but it's to operate under the correct conditions so they don't affect the rest of the society. The joint work between the insurance sector, the national government, and the persons that are obliged to have these coverages is the most promising path to find a solution to the complex issues associated with mandatory insurance. Insurance on engineering. This, signed in 2016, established the creation of guarantees for 10 years for new homeowners in the country. In 2018, the Ministry of Housing related these guarantees and granted a term of 2 years so that builders, developers could start acquiring these coverages. And because of the pandemic, elements such as the accreditation and its corresponding register were moved for several days, and this had a repercussion in the effectiveness initially established. The insurance sector and the construction sector coincide with the Ministry of Housing with regards to the need of moving this for a maximum year. This time will be used by both sectors to advance in the socialization in these guarantees, among them one that is currently covered by the national insurance. It is important to mention that Colombia has become a leader in the region to implement this type of protection for home buyers. With the creation of this insurance, we pretend to avoid events like those that happened in the set of buildings in Medellin in 2013. It is important to point out that by Colombia being a seismic country, we have advanced in the design, implementation of construction codes for seismic resistance. The decennial insurance has an additional benefit that is important for the country. The creation of a guarantor for housing works not only ensures buildings to be built accordingly to the specifications, but it also creates in the long term a country that is much more resilient before these types of events. Compliance insurance. The infrastructure projects, both national and regional, as well as other important mining projects and real estate projects with public and private contracting, are very important engines for the economic growth. These sectors, today more than ever, are called to be the key elements for the reactivation of the productive machine in our country. Our role as guarantors, without a doubt, contribute to the security required for carrying out these projects, and in this sense, we are fully aware of our social commitment that this entails. The national government and the insurance sector should work as allies in updating and optimization of the guarantees regime so that we can achieve on one side
prosperity of Colombia. Thank you.